our budget workshop on February 19th, 2019. Dr. Spence, I'll let you introduce.
I appreciate that. Thank you, and thank you, members of the board, for your input to date into the budget conversation and the first workshop. This is the second workshop. I'll just note before we get rolling that we have a third workshop scheduled for February the 26th. That's a week from today at 4 p.m. in this same place. That'll be just before our next formal board meeting. So with all of that, I'm going to turn it over to our CFO, who's going to talk about what we've heard from you in the interim, and we do have some updates on the House and Senate budget proposals, and then we want to talk a little bit about the impact of that on the SEON. So, Mr. Hanska.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Anderson, Vice Chairwoman Melnick, school board members, Dr. Spence, my colleagues and visitors. We're going to present to you this in kind of a sequential fashion, and you'll understand what I mean by that in just a second. What's displayed on the boards up here are where we originally started, how we balanced the budget in the superintendent's estimate of needs. That was our starting point. This budget is in the budget document on page 25. If you had a chance to look through that, I'm sure you've seen it. And this lists all, at the time, the revenue sources, and then the listing of how we would spend that money down to where we balance the budget. So, having said that, this is where we started based on the governor's recommended budget for next year, and any of his changes to the current year budget that would be made at the end of this year, and also next year's proposed budget. What we have done is we've analyzed the budget of the Senate and the House. We've done a deep analysis of that budget, their budgets. The House bill specifically would give us a proposal that would decrease the spending from the governor's proposal by about $1 million. The Senate bill would reduce the governor's budget to us by about $2.5 million. So in our analysis, in what's happened in many state bills, final bills in the past, the conference committee compromised and typically came something pretty close to the middle. So this is the basis of what I'm going to show you on this spreadsheet. So the difference between the 2.5 and the 1.1 is about $1.4 million. So we think that's what is going to be pretty close to what the final budget. That's $1.4 million less for us. And what you see on the screen here, so we're showing the $1.4 million. That's our best guess is what the final state budget is going to be and what it will do for us. We received recent news toward the latter part of last week that we're going to get an additional $763,000 from the city. And that's really, really good news that will be given to us in the revenue sharing formula. So that takes us to the $18.6 million. The next item is where we also got late news from the city that we're going to have to increase our portion of the joint cooperation and budget of landscaping services. So that's going to be an expense. So the net that we have to work with would be the $18,489,000. this looks pretty much like what you saw in the first spreadsheet. And so you see, the changes here, we've noted how we balance again with about 1,000,004 less from the state, and additional 763,000 from the city, having to spend 128,000 of that as an additional expense. A little bit more detail about the House and the Senate bills. The Senate, in terms of compensation, in terms of the 3%, 5%, is the same as the governor's introduced budget, which was a 5% over the biennial. That's this year and next year, not a 5% next year. It's over the 2-year biennial. The House proposal proposed to return the original compensation supplement, which was 3%, and then they add 2% effective January of 2020. So what they do, they delay the additional 2% for about half a year. So that's the difference in the House and the Senate on the compensation. Then we receive increased state funding in the SOQ for school counselors based on the adjusted staffing ratios at all grade levels. That was in the governor's budget. Senate proposal for that proposes the staffing ratios higher than the governor's budget, but still lower than the current standards. The House proposed the same as the governor's budget. Increase to the supplementary lottery per pupil amount. The Senate proposes to reduce the supplemental lottery per pupil amount, and the House proposed to increase the supplemental lottery amount. So we've factored all of that in to come up with what we've proposed here. Dr. Spence.
Also, just want to mention that this isn't necessarily the last round of
Right.
this. It hasn't been approved, as you know, and then also there's still conversations ongoing about the LCI and some adjustments to that. That's the local composite index. You're probably aware there was some budget language around that would dramatically impact higher density housing districts and would significantly help rural districts. And so Virginia Beach, Norfolk, and a few others would be disproportionately affected by that. And so just be aware that it looks like that's waning, but it hasn't officially come out of the budget.
So basically, the two adjustments with those revenues to what we originally proposed in the superintendent's estimate of needs are here. We originally had 13 guidance counselors, and based on our analysis of the Senate and House bills, we would, in order to balance, reduce 7 of those positions, leaving 6. And the other adjustment would be, we would have to eliminate the $231,698 for the base program. That's the new, located at a different site. And so everything else is pretty much the same, and we balance the budget. The next spreadsheet, what we've highlighted on this spreadsheet is what we absolutely have to do. These things above this first green highlighting are things, obviously, that we've got to do. This is the 3% salary increase. These are adjustments to the base budget. This is the expansion to the full state kindergarten. So, what's left here, all the green highlighted areas are things that we absolutely have to do. We don't have a choice. We cannot eliminate those things and apply it to any kind of additional salary increase. Everybody with me so far?
If it's okay, I'll jump in and
Please do.
just talk to those for a minute. So you've got the 3.0 special education teachers, 4.0 special education teacher assistants. Those are really to meet IEP services. The interpreter position we are frankly dramatically understaffed for interpreters given the growth in our ESL student population. The 2.0 instructional positions are ones that you've approved through the EBA approval on the licensed pharmacy tech program. And then the counselors, that is based on an assumption that the ratio will reduce based on the Senate's budget. If it does not, if the House budget holds on that number actually has to go up back to where it was. And so then we would have to identify other cuts. And then obviously we talked last time about the Comprehensive Services Act, and that's funding that we have to pay. We've been underfunding that. Homeless services, we've been underfunding that. Utility costs that we anticipate to increase, we're going to have to pay for those, and then and the other are technology contracts for system maintenance. So those are all essentially have-to-dos with very little wiggle room in the green.
Okay.
Farrell?
We understand that there's been discussion and proposals to give school employees 5%, to divorce ourselves from the city with regard to how much of a raise we give. And to do that, the next slide will show you the impact of that, the ramifications, the options that you might have or not have. It just timed out. Okay, I'm gonna try to do this from, okay. So, remember the green highlighted things from the previous slide. These are things we gotta do. Before those numbers were highlighted, you had 5,876,714 to work with. So if you start subtracting each of those things that we must do, it leaves you $2,479,000 left to work with, assuming that you didn't do any of the things that we don't have to do from the previous slides. A 2% additional salary increase would cost $10,886,723. If you take that number and you do a calculation with the money you have left to work with, you'd still have to find $8.4 million. That is a significant number. It could not be done without cuts to programs, without increases to class sizes, or significant other cuts that we would have to make. And that's really all I had to present to you right now.
Ms. Weems?
Okay, so Farrell, I want to just make sure that we all understand this, and my colleagues and those viewing understand this. So if we look at page 30, the school operating by type of where it goes, so after compensation and fringe benefits take about 85%. And so you're saying the must do's, the have to's, and of course we have to pay electricity, and we have to do state mandates. So all that stuff added on to the 85% that we're already doing for fringe benefits and compensation. So after that and the must-haves, the non-negotiables, we only have about $2.5 million.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so, and we still have programs that are really good for our schools and all that stuff that we don't want to cut. So, I know there's been talk about compensation, but I think this is, the reality of it is that 85% of our budget goes to compensation, and unless, in order to add to compensation, we've got to cut academies, programs, increase class size, and I don't think that's a good thing.
And if I could just for a second speak to this as well. So that makes an assumption, the 2.5 million remaining at the end of that list of green there makes an assumption that we wouldn't address a couple of other things in here that I want to at least speak again to one more time, which is, in particular, the psychologist and behavior intervention positions, which we have heard over and over again from our principals and our teachers that they need that support because of behavioral issues in our classrooms, particularly at the primary grades. It would eliminate the 6 positions that we've included to continue to reduce high school class sizes, and it would eliminate any of the proposed changes in the Office of Safe Schools relative to security, staffing, and personnel. And so, and then there's 5 special education buses that we do need to replace, but we'd like to work those into the operating budget if we can, because that's an ongoing need, but that's something that we certainly could adjust if we had to. I just think the board has to be very, and I know the board is, but I think the board needs to just continue to be aware that those are not needs we pulled out of the air. Those are needs that are addressing significant challenges that we're facing, and that you have talked with us about, and that our schools and principals and teachers have talked with us about. So I want to make sure that we're also understanding relative to the green that we're showing you, that to get to having 2.5 million remaining means none of those other things are in the budget.
Right.
We take all those out.
Right, yeah, okay, yeah, thank you for that, cause actually we don't have 2.5 million left if we do that. We have 0 left because it's balanced budget.
Correct.
Right, and so to get anything else additional for compensation, we're gonna have to just make some really, decisions that I don't think would be good for our students.
Ms. Manning?
So I have several questions from going through this today, but one of them is on staffing, what we're talking about here, so I'd like to go ahead and address that. On page 42 of the estimate of needs, under staffing highlights, it says, under staffing allocation summary, that we're going to have an increase of 89.7 FTEs from the previous year's budget, and then down under staffing highlights, it details what those are, and I just had some questions on those. It says 9 full-time employees for instructional positions to address behavior. What specifically are those instructional positions?
So you have the 5 behavior intervention specialists, and then 4 that were allocated this year that were temporary, that we'd like to create full-time. But they're in the operating budget already.
Okay, can you just explain to me a little bit what a behavior intervention specialist does?
So these are BCBAs, Board Certified Behavior Analysts. And their certification is essentially how to work with students with significant behavioral challenges in our classrooms. Right now, what we've done is we've allocated them to the elementary schools because of the concerns about K-1-2 behaviors. And so they're sort of working across, for example, if we get to this ratio, they would work 1 to 6 schools essentially. And so when there is a student in crisis and a teacher's dealing with that, that person goes there, they work with the student, but particularly they're coaching the teacher on the behavior strategies to help not trigger that student's behaviors, and then what to do when that student is behaving that way. So you guys have all heard about our students who are destroying our classrooms, hitting our teachers, biting our teachers. And we've had these conversations about how this is largely a K-2 issue. And as shocking as that is not unique to Virginia Beach. That's happening certainly with my colleagues across the state, and I suspect if we were to start looking at it, it's a national issue. So these folks are trained to help teachers and principals deal with those behaviors, help refocus the student on more appropriate behaviors, and also to work with the families on how to reinforce those more appropriate behaviors at home. Because a lot of the problem that we have, as you can imagine, is that we can work with them and we can correct those behaviors, but when they go home over the weekend or at night, they come back and those behaviors have not, those positive interventions have not been reinforced. So these folks also work with parents to accomplish that. I will just tell you anecdotally, and I have not surveyed because these are relatively new positions, but if you were to speak to our principals, they'll tell you this has been the most significant support they've had around behavior, and they have asked for more of these positions.
Okay.
Because up until now, it was just the AP pretty much taking the whole day to try to figure out the challenges of this child that is interrupting the classroom, correct?
That's correct.
Right, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
We have had in the past behavior interventions on staff. They have always been assigned to OPEC, And so they have only been on board to work with students who've got identified disabilities. So these folks we're bringing on are outside of OPEC, and they are to work with all students because largely the problems that I'm describing are problems with students who are non-identified.
Okay. And then my second question on that is, when I total up all of the detailed positions here, I came up with 81, so I'm just wondering what the additional 8.7 positions are.
Gonna turn to the budget staff for the answer to that.
No, it comes to the 87. We, in the summary, we probably didn't include detail everything
Okay.
in the numbers that's. in the
These are
book.
just,
Highlights.
just
Just
some
highlights.
examples, the highlights. They're not everything that we.
Well, it came up to 81, I counted, so I just thought that it was going to be all of them.
Not,
If
Okay.
you look at.
Oh, yeah, it's just highlights.
yeah,
If you look at page 44,
Okay.
it's got the
It's
details.
got the detail, page 44, it comes down. The summary didn't pick up every single number, it just put the highlights.
Page 44.
40.
44.
It shows me the breakdown of the positions.
By unit.
Oh, I
Just
see.
by
Oh,
units.
okay. Okay, it says like by elementary classroom, senior high classroom. Okay, great.
And it'll take you to the 87.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And then it also mentioned that, is it correct that we have 15 full-time employees for the Scratch Cooking Initiative? I've read that in here as well.
The those would be folks who are already employed. So they were like cafeteria managers and some of those folks, and we're just dedicating them to the Scratch Cooking Initiative in their school. So it's kind of repurposing versus new folks.
Because it says an increase of 15 for the Scratch Cooking Initiative, so,
They ask for additional chefs to go, to bring online additional people as they bring out the Scratch program to other schools. So they would be additional.
okay. So I love the idea of the Scratch Cooking Initiative. I think it's fantastic. I think we need to consider whether or not that's a priority.
Well, so relative to that, just remember that's an enterprise fund, so that's outside of the general operating budget. So they are their own, whatever they make,
They
they
make,
use.
okay,
Yeah.
okay,
So they're outside of any conversations
Gotcha.
about
They
the
have
operating
a
budget.
really good fund balance, so.
okay, great, okay,
So that doesn't really affect our budget.
great,
It doesn't affect these numbers at
Wonderful.
all.
Right.
thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, I have more, but I don't want
Go, keep going, because no one
Okay.
else at this point has said anything, so.
Okay,
Assisted Donnie.
okay, on the topic of school safety and the presentation that was given to us a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Freeman might be the one to answer these questions. I have been very pleased with what I've seen in many of our schools over the last 6 months or so with the buzzer system. They've, reorganized the security desks. I don't see the security folks operating as volunteers anymore to run errands. I think they're doing a fantastic job with that. I think we have really improved in that area in just a small amount of time. I love the uniform idea for our security assistants. I love having a lead security assistant. And I think it was Mr. McDonald that suggested that perhaps the pay that we've suggested for that lead security assistant is not enough. I am hesitant to approve 2 more management positions there. I would suggest that we put some more money toward the lead security assistant position and hold off on the management level positions until we've implemented all of this. And then next year, if we find that we still desire to have that and that's still needed, maybe relook at that next year. So that's a suggestion that I have in that area.
Could I ask how much money that would save?
Well,
We'll
it's
give you
not-
that amount in a second, but let me say this, and I'm going to turn it over to Jack. So I had similar eyebrow raises when we started talking about that, because it isn't really my inclination, despite what some people point at me, like it isn't my inclination to raise central office positions. So we did have this conversation. Jack made a compelling case, and I think I'd like you to hear what he had to say to me about it as well. So, Mr. Freeman, you want to talk about it?
Absolutely, thank you. The decisions and analysis that we're making in Safe Schools are based off of the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations. So when you match up the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations against those positions, they're very strongly associated. So those positions are directly in line with expanding training, better preventative security, strengthening procedures, strengthening infrastructure, and increasing camera and sensors. Those are the two positions that are going to do all of those. And if you remember from the presentation, one of those, when we lined up the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations based on how that would affect the Blue Ribbon Panel, they met all the Blue Ribbon, they would support all the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations. So those are two of the most strongly associated positive moves to address the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations.
So can you give me a little more detail on what these two positions will do, the program manager and the coordinator?
Right. So the coordinator, safe school audits, assessment review, trainings, which mean tabletop training, MANT training, crisis response, lockdown drills, radio communications, Genetech training, coordination of response to school requests with the camera footage downloads, other things that happen when there are incidents that occur, to supervise the security officers. If you remember, the security officers, the group that kind of patrol and respond during non-working hours currently, how it's set up. They do the emergency response plan review. If there are any responses required to a securely hit or input, they take those through all hours of the day. Graduation, special events planning, and crisis response team review. So that's the coordinator. For the project manager, essentially all major projects, which include fencing, security equipment and purchasing, researching infrastructure assessments, continuity of operations, how we do our shelters, which right now needs a substantial amount of work, how we coordinate for those kind of things, full-scale exercise planning, restructuring of the security assistant programs, and significantly grants. The funding, the way that funding has worked in the States has transitioned more from giving you funding just because you're a school system and you have to apply and show need for that, and it's a substantial amount of work and effort. So there is a direct link in cost benefit to having a position that is focused on being able to capture as many grants as possible from the state.
So that position might actually pay for itself.
I caution using that language, but there are a lot of people that like to use that language. But yes, if you establish one grant for $200,000, yes, for that year it would have paid for itself.
Okay. I still do have some concerns, though, about not being able to pay the lead security person enough money. So I think that that's something that we need to consider, and I know that our budget is limited right now. Now, are we changing the structure of who these security assistants are reporting to, or are they still going to be reporting to the principals?
So that's so the brief that I gave you was a budget-based brief, and that's kind of a phase 2 item as to how that is structured. But certainly, we're looking to make a stronger connection in how Safe Schools interacts and trains those security assistants. So that is a discussion item, and that needs a lot more work before we can give you any
But
answer.
for evaluation purposes, things like that, they're still going to be reporting to the principal as of right now.
So so a lot of that depends on what happens with the budget. Because if we've got enough support in Safe Schools, we have several models that are co-evaluated models. And so likely it would be a co-evaluated model, either evaluated by the safety coordinators or evaluated by the principal with input from one or the other. But so for example, like the ITS positions are co-evaluated right now. So there's input from the principal and from their ITCs. And I suspect down the road it would be similarly structured, not to get ahead of what Jack's trying to say, but a lot of that has to do with how much support we can offer the schools. Given the current structure, we can't do it that way.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Edwards?
I had the same issue that Mrs. Manning just addressed. We discussed it with Dr. Spencer. I'm reluctant to support 2 full-time positions for it. At a minimum, I'd like to see the one position which has the potential to kind of quote fund itself over time, potentially added as a with a sunset provision. That, I mean, I just don't think in the long run we necessarily will need it. We're obviously reacting to known threats and known challenges that we have to deal with. But I would hope we could stabilize and maybe not need, and once staffing is in place, it almost never goes away unless there's a catalyst to cause it to be reevaluated. So if there's, and again, this is a John Mira Farrell thing. If there's some way to make it somewhat less than a permanent FTE forever, I'd like to see that kind of built in. I mean, I just I saw how the Navy responded to the threats of on the coal and all of the other stuff like that, and the infrastructure that got built up, not only facility wise but staffing wise and all that, and it got permanentized because I was the CFO for the base back then, and I don't know. I mean, it's real. It's important. I don't want to minimize it, but I also want to manage it on a permanent basis. So, again, I'm not suggesting X amount of dollars or anything, but in addressing the same concerns Mrs. Manning did, if there's some way to cause it to be reevaluated a year from now or whatever.
John's not here, but I'll turn back to HR for a second. I do think we could look at an annual contract for a position like that and then have an annual evaluation, whether or not it's, as a, for example, although you wouldn't necessarily want to do it this way, if they're able to secure grants relative to their costs. then
I understand
makes it
that
functional.
diminishes the quality of the person you're going to get. I know there's a
Correct.
downside
That's
to
the
that
concern,
too,
right.
Yeah.
but
For a safety.
there's a downside to leaving it there forever if it's not really. Yeah. Okay.
Understood. We certainly could evaluate that though.
If I may just address that concern for the long term, it is my assessment that there's going to be more than enough requirements that are directly related to the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations. Well, this will be an enduring requirement to be able to meet the improvements that we're looking for in audits and assessments and in training as we move forward.
And that was what I was going to say. Based on your job description, I think it would seem reckless on our part not to staff that properly. And I think this division has moved things around when they need to. I really do feel that'd be reckless on our part.
I was, Mr. Freeman did not say the one thing that he said to me, which was the thing that sort of put me over the edge in front of putting it into the spreadsheet and getting it into the budget during those conversations, which was, we can be safe. We can be what we're seeing today, and we can continue to do that with the current resources. But his assessment, the assessment of the people that he's brought on with expertise in this area, well beyond our security expert. This is not our field, right? Like our field is schools. We're learning more and more about safe schools as we go, and we've brought people in who have some expertise. But his assessment was that we could not and would not meet the recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Panel without the staffing he was asking for. So I'll leave it at that.
I think I'm like Ms. Melnick. He's the expert
Mm-hmm.
in this area. Real.
We're
That's a
not,
long
we're not
list
talking
of
about a
duties.
dozen
Yeah.
positions. It's 2.
Mr. Honsinger?
I just would like to add, I've been evaluating budget proposals for a long time, you all know. And I will tell you that what they did, led by Jack Freeman and professional security people, that, as Dr. Spence said, that's not our bailiwick, was very professional, and it was an outstanding job of laying out what the needs were. What we have in place works right now, but there's more and more and more and more issues regarding school safety that's probably going to come our way. There's a need to upgrade the skills and abilities of the people that we have. His plan would do that. And with that, I just thought I would throw that in.
Mr. McDonald?
Thank you. Sort of turning to unmet needs, to more complicated discussion. So we knew when we moved to one-to-one that it was going to take a significant investment to get there and a significant investment to keep it going. They got $1.8 million here in unmet needs for that initiative. Is that replacement cost for devices? Is that the full cost for 1 year of replacement costs that we're not funding? Next year, if we don't fund this, are we looking at $3.6 million as a one-time and then 1.8 continuing? What happens if we don't touch that? And then the broader concern is that anyone that's ever dealt with technology that's aging, considering how much emphasis we put on using devices, if those things start going down, we're really going to cripple what's going on in our classrooms. So I want to raise a flag here. This is an expensive initiative that we went into, and if we're not going to keep up with it, I've got a lot of concerns.
You could use the similar analogy with what's happening with the whiteboards at the moment, right?
Right.
So all of them bought at once, all of them going down. We've been fairly strategic, and I can let Ramesh and Farrell speak to it, but we've been fairly strategic about phasing them in over a course of a couple of years so that you don't have all of them at one time needing to be phased out. We're actually getting to the place now where we're ready to start phasing out the first year of the initiative, the first anchor schools with new devices. And so at least from that perspective, it's not a whole cost at one time to answer part of your question. It's a piece of the cost. But if we don't continue to address that and at some point get that into the operating budget, it will become problematic for us. Right now, we are able to deal with some of that through year-end dollars, and you've seen technology dollars in our reversion requests. And so we have been able to tackle those issues that way so far. But at some point, we are going to have to try to get this into our operating budget, completely into our operating
Right.
budget. Some of it's in there now.
So there is money there that's being used to replace
Absolutely.
devices right now.
There's absolutely money in the operating budget for the replacement of devices right now. It's just not the full amount, and that's why you see that some of that is an unmet need. Farrell, you want to keep going with that?
And what we don't, and what we're not able to do with the full amount, we supplement that with reversion recommendations when we deal with reversion funds. So we've been strategic, as Dr. Spence, just like the school buses.
Right.
We started out, we had a need to have 50 in the base budget. We started out with 0. Over the last 7 or 8 years, we've got it up with what's proposed for 5 more special ed, we'll be up to 40. So over the years, we went to 0 to 40 in the base budget. We only got 2 more budget cycles, we'll be at 50 where we need to be. Same with the technology one-to-one. Same with the whiteboards. It's going to take us some time to get there, but we'll strategically try to build some in the base budget every year and then augment that with one-time reversions until we get those things in the base budget.
Thank you.
That's not the only thing. They're white fleet vehicles, maintenance vehicles. Those things have to be replaced after several 100,000 miles, it seems. And so we're trying to do that. So it's enough. There are major needs going forward like that they're not fancy. They don't get a lot of attention, but we got to do it. We got to have safe vehicles for our folks to use.
If I may add, the way we have projected these numbers is to have the replacement cycle over a 4-year time frame. So at this $1.8 million, we'll be replacing 18,000 Chromebooks every year. So this way, we won't have uneven years where 1 year is $3 million, another year is something less. And with this approach, Farrell can budget according to this projected annual recurring charge. And normally in the Chromebook area, some school divisions go with 3 years, but I believe that we can get 4 years out of it. Of course, based on what we see as to the condition of those devices, we may have to come back and revisit, but I believe based on what we are seeing that 4 years is a good replacement cycle.
Right, but it's easy to fall into where we were with buses, though, to say, are we going to push off for a year? And now not only that, those 5-year devices plus the devices that come up with 4 years. So that's the challenge. So I just want to make sure we stay on top of that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions, suggestions, comments? This is our time. Ms. Manning?
I have one on the CIP regarding. I'm sorry if I've missed this
No, it's okay.
conversation, but I did not know that we were planning to build a 4th through 6th grade Betty F. Williams school. So I was just wondering if we could get an update on that and
Sure.
And Jericho Road.
Yeah, so that came through the long range facilities plan study. And the conversation there was that there's space on the Betty F. Williams campus to build 2 facilities. So it would be similar to the Lansdowne complex where you've got Lansdowne Elementary and Lansdowne Middle next to one another. So basically 2 schools in one building with some shared facilities, which would ultimately, in the long range, get the students out of the Aragona building so we could figure out what to do with that building. The other advantage, there's 2 other advantages to that. One of the advantages is it gets everybody on the same road, so that all the Bayside Middle and Bayside 6th grade kids would be on the same road. And then the other advantage to that is you get one less facility transition for that group of students. If you look at them now, if they're tri-campus students,
oh yeah,
they go through 4 buildings before they get to high school. So I mean, they're moving from 3 on the tri-campus into the 6th grade campus into the middle school campus. So it's actually 6 buildings into the high school campus. And so if we could just eliminate at least one of those transitions, that's a positive for those students. So I think that's where that came out of the long range plan. We also see, and Tony could speak to this piece of it, a little bit of economy of scale by not having to build 2 buildings for that group of students. And so, and I know the board has a long range goal of getting students out of Aragona.
so it will be just one building on the current Betty F. Williams campus, or it will be 2 buildings?
It's one. The concept, like I said, is like it's 2 wings. So
Okay.
so it's one building, like
Yep.
Lansdowne Middle, Lansdowne Elementary is all one building, and they've got shared cafeteria and I think shared gym
Okay.
space. Similar concept there, and obviously on a much smaller scale because we're not talking about the same size as the Lansdowne.
Okay, will we be renovating the current building or tearing it down?
That's a architectural thing, but my guess is
It better come.
I think that's a come down one. That's
Yeah,
if you've been in that facility.
We had known all along that just looking at Betty F. Williams, that building wanted to be torn down. So there's sufficient room to build it, to not worry about swing space, keep kids in the building. So this would allow the 4th and 5th graders remaining in Williams, 6th graders in the Aragona, the old, what I call the old Aragona building, build a 4 through 6 building, on the order of about 140,000 square feet, plus or minus, along the same model that Dr. Spence mentioned, where you have kind of 2 buildings attached to the hip, shared physical plant. So there's some economies in doing that. So that's what it came from. It was in the long range plan.
Okay.
Ms. Williams?
So the Bayside Middle now, not on Jericho Road, is not big enough for the students to go back? Because I thought an addition
So-
was added in order to do that.
That goes back to a conversation we've been having for a couple of years now about whether or not they should go back. And so
Oh,
right
so
now,
that's still, okay, that's still the reason, okay.
yeah, our position holds
Okay.
that right now that school is thriving.
Okay.
That the transition was difficult for the 6th grade students to go onto the Bayside Middle campus, and that was creating a number of behavioral challenges that were leading to classroom challenges that were leading to some of the problems on the campus, which is why when the school was going through, sorry, drawing a name on it, but reconstitution,
Yeah.
that it was split into 2 schools. And right now, because of the results we're getting out of both of those schools, our position continues to be that or remain separate campuses. So, with that, we would advocate for, and again, you all approved, at least in the long range facility study, that model. And so we'd ask you to approve it in the CIP. This would be the first year of that, and I want to just say that again because I want to make sure we're super clear. That's 6 years out for just the
Right,
first stage of funding.
Right.
So we are a very long way away from
Yeah.
accomplishing anything with the Aragona campus for those who have an interest in the Aragona campus
That's
facility.
fine,
Okay.
yes.
Just
Okay.
making sure we're all on
And
the
I
same
have
page.
passed that information along as well, 5 or 6 or 7 years out.
To put a real date on it, when you look into the details of the project schedule, the earliest it could be completed is 2029, a decade. And that is the only other, only other modernization replacement project beyond Prince Anne High School that's in the program. And that one's not funded.
That should ease the concerns of the Aragona population that's always concerned about what we're gonna do with their campus over there, so. It's quite a ways away.
Right.
Before we have to do anything or think about what we could do over there. Any other comments or suggestions? I just wanna say that my feeling is the same and that, I trust the experts on our security at this point, and I am not in favor of not including, what they recommended. Mr. Hosiger?
I need to say this before you go away, so you're getting close to going away. We want you to be prepared to make some final decisions at the next workshop, because that's the last workshop prior to the date you're scheduled, March 5th, to adopt the budget. So I just needed to say that. Please be prepared to make some final decisions at your next budget workshop. And I do have some additional information regarding your calendar. We are scheduled to go before the city council on April the 23rd to present your budget.
Also, I
And
know,
I need to know if, from Madam Chairman and Dr. Spence, if that's okay with your calendars, I can okay that with the city. If that is not, we can get an earlier date.
We will let you know
Okay.
ASAP.
sure will.
Anything? Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm just gonna say again, in the interim, so we've got 2 weeks between now and the next meeting. Farrell and I remain available to you to answer questions that you have and to continue this conversation, certainly individually. And then we'll, as a reminder, we got another workshop next, we have 1
That's
week.
for me.
Yeah, 1 week, next
Yeah,
week.
1 week.
Yeah, apologies,
And if the state
trying to spread it out.
doesn't get their budget to us in a timely fashion, whatever the final version is, you can adopt this version, and between when you submit it to the city and actually when we present it to the city, since it's a month and a half away, we can reconcile and true it up and take it another request back to the city that shows us the changes. We've done that in the past. I'm just saying, if we don't get the reconciled budget from the state in time for you to make final decisions next week, that's not an issue, because we can amend the budget between when we present it, you approve it in March, and before they adopt it before May the 15th.
I would be very happy if we could amend it to include additional funds, but obviously, it doesn't look that way. I just want to say that, I know we all received, emails this past week from our educators in the profession that have asked for the 5%, and I'm so glad that you addressed that. Of course, as a retired teacher, I feel their pain, and I absolutely wish that we could grant that. But being that we're already looking at cutting things because of anticipated lower amount of money from the state, I don't see us going there. But I do hope that we will all protect the 3% that we've told them that we're going to be giving them. Ms. Williams. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
Didn't see
if
that.
we had our magic wand, of course, we would extend the budget to include a lot more money. but we don't, and resources are limited. But I just wanna thank Farrell and Dr. Spence and everybody that worked on the budget, because I think this budget is good and solid, and I think it focuses on two areas that the community is very, focused on, and that we as a board have focused on the last few years, and that's safety and special ed. And you can tell that those were priorities in this budget, and I appreciate that. And so I think it's a good, solid budget. Thank
Ms. Melnick?
I just want to state for the record that while our resources might be limited, I want to make it perfectly clear that I'm disappointed with our legislators. The money is there, and I'm really getting tired of our legislators working against public schools and not funding our teachers, as we are facing a national teacher shortage. And I think it's criminal, and I'm tired of referring to Richmond as purgatory, but that is about what it is. And there are a few that make a great stand, but I think what we're going to be witnessing sometime soon are teachers just dropping off the map, and then we're going to be in a really bad position. And unfortunately, right now we have a lot of competing items, and our hands are tied, but the people above us, their hands are not tied. And it's time for people to start taking a stand for public education. We go to court for people who scream and cry about free public schools, and yet we're not willing to do our part. I wanted to be the knight in shining armor this time. Obviously, we're not going to do it, but people need to start waking up and doing what's right.
Ms.
And,
Ray?
and I do want to say, we're lucky that we have the city, and we're lucky that they fund 51% of their budget comes to us, and Richmond could do a lot better. Ms. Riggs, sorry.
Ms. Riggs?
Okay, I'm very, very disappointed with it. I'm very disappointed with the way the state has presented it, our governor, and making everyone believe that we were gonna have 5% this year. I think it was, bait and switch. I think it was ridiculous the way they did it. And I really like our governor. I know a lot of people are very upset with him with other things, but,
Oh, yeah,
sorry. I just think it's another way of a slap in the face to our educators. I think you agree.
I do.
It's time. I want to know what they're going to do. I mean, they keep saying we hear there's a shortage of teachers. There's a shortage of teachers. What are they going to do about it? They're going to wait till it's here and then it's too late. They're not going to get these. They're not going to get them. And to hear some of our legislators speak, it's like, oh, we're not going to give the teachers a raise. We're going to make sure all that money goes back to the taxpayers. Well, that's good. We all need it. We're all going to benefit. But the bottom line is, education has gotten the short end for too long. And I, like Kim, I was going to be the, I'm going to hold out on this one. But obviously, they have different ways of doing this to us. So I'm just very upset with our legislators, and I just can't wait for them to start running again. Their campaigns to come up so we can say sorry. We need to get somebody that cares. We've got the money up there. They keep saying things are better, times are better, but they're not showing us that.
That's true.
Ms. Weems?
I mean, that's so true, and I think that we can also say this is not a Virginia Beach problem, it's not a state of Virginia problem, it's a national problem.
Yep.
And until we start uplifting the profession of educator and teacher, it's not gonna change, because an extra 2% or 3% or 4% is not gonna make people wanna major in education. You've gotta bring that salary way up, way up, to be able to solve this problem, and I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it's a whole societal you know, and we've talked about that before. I mean, when my grandmother was a teacher and my grandfather was a superintendent, teachers were up here, you know, right below God, and the preachers were below them. You know, I mean, or on the same
That's
level.
true.
You know, I mean, the honor that she had as a teacher was, and it's just not like that anymore. And until we do that on a national level, you know, our little 1 or 2% extra is not going to change the profession or the willingness of people to go to college. And some of our colleges have dropped education as a major too. I mean, what Virginia Tech did it 6 or 7 years ago. So it's just yeah, I don't know the answer to it, but yeah, I mean, I agree. But it's at the national level and it's at society. We've got to uplift the profession of education somehow.
Miss Manning?
So, with all of this into consideration, what our best guess is on what we're getting from the state, what are we getting this year compared to last year? More or less?
More.
We got more.
How much?
It's on the handout.
It's,
Well, but these numbers have changed. Is it? No, it's on the.
Yeah.
Millions.
I'm sorry.
You mean from the state? Is that what
From
you're
the
saying?
state, yes.
$14 million. If you look on page 25,
We keep getting more every year.
So we're
That's
getting,
true, but we still have, when you take into consider inflation levels, we still have not,
An unfunded mandate.
we still have not met what they cut from us in 2008, 2009.
But their response is every year we're getting more, and
I
every year
know,
we're
but they-
reducing our student population. I mean,
Right.
that's where, you know.
So we're getting 14 million more this
it
year.
would be 14 million less the 1 million
Minus-
So
four.
we're getting roughly 13 million more than last year from the state. Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
But I
yeah, we
think
get
last-
more, but,
Last year, we were still something like $600 and something off per student.
right,
So per
Since
student funding
2008.
still
From
hasn't
the
caught up.
state
since
average,
that.
or-
yes, from the state average.
It's
It's
in
still
the beginning paragraph of our legislative agenda.
so what I would say to that sort of shortly, because I've heard that every time I go to Richmond,
No,
is for the folks who are currently in the assembly who were not in the assembly prior to the recession, their statement that we've given you more money every year is accurate. The problem is we haven't caught up to the funding drop that happened in the recession.
Right.
So that's the real issue, right? Is if we were even at the funding level we were at pre-recession, we would be able to address some more of these compensation issues than we're able to at the moment. We just haven't caught up. Even though we're getting more than we got last year, we still haven't recuperated from the recession. I mean, that's the real challenge that we're dealing with. And there are mechanisms that were put in place during the recession to help balance the state budget that we were told at the time were temporary, and I wasn't here, but I've learned a lot about this since then, that we were told were temporary mechanisms. The big one that you keep hearing about is the support cap, the cap on support position funding, right, in the SOQs. And so basically what they said was prior to 2008, there was a prevailing method of funding that. And it basically said, let's look across the state and see what school divisions are doing to fund support positions, and let's try to fund them at that level, the prevailing level. Because the understanding was that school divisions generally know how many psychologists, nurses, counselors, other things that they need. And so let's look at those, what they categorize as support positions, and let's allow school divisions to sort of dictate the funding flow on that. Well, that was a large part of the spending. And so to cut that, they just said arbitrarily, we're going to set a cap of X number of positions per pupil. And they, at the time, suggested that was going to be temporary, and when funds were restored to pre-recession levels at the state, that they would lift that cap and go back to the prevailing method. And of course, funds have now significantly exceeded, revenues have now significantly exceeded pre-recession levels. Of course, you got to account also for inflation, but they have not lifted the cap. Were they to lift that cap, what would the immediate fix be for us?
Between
About 20 million?
16 to 20 million.
Yeah, it'd be a $20 million return to our school division, which obviously would do a lot to address some of our concerns relative to compensation and all that. The other thing I would say is I think it lights us off the hook to say it's not just a Virginia problem, because Virginia has gone down dramatically in terms of overall state funding, and it has gone more so than other states, which is why it went from being in the middle of the pack to now down to 32nd, and as I shared in the estimated needs transmittal letter, if you took out Northern Virginia, that number drops even more remarkably. So I do think Virginia needs to step up and do its part. It's frustrating for those of us, all of you included, who go up there every year and have this conversation, to be told the same thing, which is we're doing our job. And so I don't think we are. It's frustrating for our teachers association and our teachers to have to hear 3% when they're hoping for 5%. It's frustrating for me as a superintendent to have to say I don't have it. And I'm sure frustrating for you as a board to say we don't have it. And frankly, inappropriate from my perspective to go and say, to ask our city to do something different. Because quite frankly, outside of, we're going to have some revenue sharing formula renegotiations, and perhaps we can find additional revenues through that process as we head into that conversation this summer. But to, as Mrs. Melnick said, so the local burden, so it's technically not 51% of their budget, but the local burden is now 51%. Mm-hmm. That is a shift from 45% pre-recession, and so that's a dramatic difference in what the state has said is now the locality's responsibility. We're very fortunate in Virginia Beach. I hope everybody in our community understands and appreciates that, and we understand and appreciate that, because if you go out west, you've got school divisions whose localities do not have the ability to do what Virginia Beach has done, which is to keep the system moving forward. But to go and ask for additional revenues from the city through tax increases or things is not appropriate. It's appropriate to get that money at the state level because the state has a constitutional obligation to fund public education, and it isn't meeting that obligation. And to shift it to the locality is inappropriate. I'll get off my soapbox, but I just feel like I at least need to state I am equally frustrated, as is my staff, with these challenges that we have, and we feel we've given you a budget that's a reasonable one given our circumstances.
Ms. Felton?
And I'd just like to piggyback on what everyone has said about Carolyn. You're right. It is a national crisis. I had the opportunity, and I was going to hold this, but that you're talking about teachers. I attended the Teachers of Color Summit this past weekend, 2 days. And it's an oxymoron when you walk around talking to students. It was like maybe 40 students or more there recruiting and wanting to be teachers coming into the profession. And the theme of it was recruiting and retaining teachers. To me, that's an oxymoron because it's not what we're doing, and they're leaving in such a fast pace. And we're going to the colleges to recruit these students. And obviously, if it's a national crisis, they know that teachers of color is one of the things that they're focusing on. So we're at a very devastating point of our division and our teaching career. And my heart goes out to the teachers because they're more than just teachers. When they're in the classroom, they do a lot more than that. But I hope that the state will step up and do what they need to get done and create this and make this profession what it used to be or more.
Mm-hmm. I would have to add that I do put God first and then teachers right there because my 5 kids and granddaughter have had the most awesome, and this year my granddaughter has the most awesome teacher. So I put y'all up there, and I'm sorry that we can't do more, but I have the utmost respect for the
Ms. Fry.
My only contribution to this conversation is to share that what a difference 4 decades makes. The reason I wound up going the corporate route in my early adult life because there was a teacher surplus.
Exactly,
and
that's what I did too.
Yeah, this was northern New Jersey, and granted, the salaries were very decent, and so the contrast, the 2 outliers from surplus, and through the years. Yes, wanted to point out that contrast.
I did the same thing. Couldn't get a job teaching.
Okay. Well, I don't see anyone else in the key here because I think somebody put the key away. But if there's nothing else, then we will adjourn. There are some snacks down there which you all could have had before the meeting, but please pick up something on the way out.
Carol, I changed my name to my senior.
Yes. Before we leave, could we? We have something that we'd like.
Hold on. Wait.
Not for you all, but for the board. We have little gifts that we have for our clerks. This is Clerk Appreciation Week. Yay! So we have little gifts for you. Yeah. And cards.
Oh, thank you.
I can get my $10.
So Carolyn, what did you take?
Couldn't do it without you.
That's a true story.
I can say that, we can't do this without this.
They're the best.
Everybody pretty much.
All right, we are adjourned.
Okay, so, all right, I heard from my mom. He pitched 4 innings. 1 walk.